Captain Jake Morrison was halfway through his morning coffee when the sky lit up with a fleet large enough to block out the stars. 200 alien warships, each the size of a city, had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. They came with threats, weapons, and a message: bow before your new galactic overlords. But they weren't ready for what humanity would do next. Before we dive into this epic clash between humans and an unstoppable alien empire, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the universe is full of stories where the underdog doesn't just survive. They change everything. Commander Rylan Voss was halfway through his morning brew when the entire cosmos seemed to crash into his radar. He nearly inhaled the steaming liquid as the alert panels around him erupted in crimson light. 200 colossal vessels had just emerged from slip space on the fringe of the Solari Reach, each one dwarfing anything the Terran Union had ever engineered. He lowered his cup onto the console with a soft clink, the warmth forgotten. Aboard the orbital watchtower Sentinel Arcus, Earth's outpost was modest by galactic standards, aged, underfunded, but his post nonetheless. For 3 long rotations, he had monitored cosmic debris and rogue asteroids. This was no drifting rock. "Kalen, confirm what I'm seeing," he called, voice low but urgent. Lieutenant Kalen Sarah, his signals analyst, blinked hard at her terminal. Her face had gone pale beneath the monitor's glow. "Commander, registering 200 separate entities. Each one's mass matches a continental zone. These aren't scouts. They brought their whole armory." Her voice held, but barely. Rylan could feel the tremor hiding behind her words. He pulled up the external cams, then chuckled. A dark, stunned, disbelieving laugh. The enemy fleet looked monstrous, enormous beasts of alloy bristling with cannonry like metallic thorns. It was as if an entire urban district had been welded into a weaponized monolith. Kalen swiveled toward him. "Sir, what's funny?" Rylan gestured at the display. "Those titans, they're absurd. They're massive, sure. But watch how they maneuver. Like glaciers in orbit. And the weapon mounts? They're pointing in every direction, except where it matters. It's like someone tried to build a fortress without thinking about physics." The armada crept inward, its vast shadows sliding across Jupiter's rim. The larger warships turned slowly, ungainly leviathans grinding their way past the gas giant's moons. One barely missed colliding with an ancient asteroid field, scraping past it like a drifting island. "We've got a signal," Kalen said, hands darting across the console. "Multi-band broadcast, non-standard encryption." "Patch it through," Rylan replied, lips twitching with dark amusement. The laugh was gone now. His eyes stayed on the screen, on the juggernauts drifting ever closer. The display surged with light, and then a figure emerged. It looked like a sculpture come to life, a towering shard of refracting crystal, with limbs that shimmered like frozen lightning. There was no visible face, but something about its bearing conveyed power and menace. When it spoke, the voice echoed like thunder bouncing through a hollow canyon, deep, resonant, and layered with distortion. "Primal life forms of the third sphere," the being announced, its tone dripping with regal disdain. "I am Grand Marshal Soric's Vicor, first spear of the Celestial Dominion. You stand at the threshold of ascension. The might of 1,000 empires bears down upon your world. Kneel before the Dominion, and your species may yet earn the privilege of servitude." Commander Rylan Voss glanced at Kalen, who was biting her lip to keep from laughing. He reached for his comm switch, trying to suppress a grin. "Well, greetings, Grand Marshal," he said, his voice smooth casual. "This is Commander Voss, outpost lead here on Sentinel Arcus. Welcome to our quiet little stretch of the void. Gotta say, your ships are something else. Big, spiky, very dramatic." He leaned back in his chair, watching the alien commander's image remain motionless. "Quick question, though. Do those things steer? Or do you just kind of point them and pray?" The channel went silent. Reelan imagined the alien trying to process what had just happened. This probably wasn't how their glorious conquests usually began. Kaylin turned away from her screen, her shoulders shaking. Reelan gave her a wink and tapped the mic again. No disrespect intended, Marshal. I've just spent the last hour watching your fleet try to drift around Jupiter. Fascinating stuff. That lead cruiser of yours, the one covered in extra artillery, nearly clipped one of the moons. Just saying, might want to check the maneuvering thrusters. The crystal figure flickered back onto the screen, and Reelan swore it now radiated something between confusion and fury. You insolent creature, it snarled. That vessel could shatter your planet with a single volley. It holds the power of 100 armadas. You speak to an apex predator of the stars. Reelan tilted his head, nodding. Yeah, I bet it could do some serious damage. Assuming it ever faces the right direction. Be honest with me, Marshal. How long does it take that thing to make a U-turn? 3 hours? 4. The Marshal let out a grinding noise like collapsing glass. Your simplistic intellect cannot grasp the intricacies of Dominion design. These ships are paragons of innovation, perfected over eons. Oh, I believe that, Reelan said, his tone still light. Must have taken some brilliant minds ages to build them. Really impressive. But, just out of curiosity, did anyone stop to ask whether making them that massive was actually a good idea? Reelan stepped away from his console, approaching the screen, as the crystalline specter flickered in place. See, Marshal, he said slowly. We Terrans have this old saying, keep it simple, genius. The smartest answers aren't always the fanciest, they're the ones that work. Behind him, Kaylin's fingers flew across her interface. Commander, I'm detecting activity in their weapon lattice. Some kind of energy cannon is powering up. Reelan turned to the tactical overlay. She was right. The Dominion's lead vessel, the Crucible Ascendant, was building a staggering energy signature. The readings surged in a steady climb, and it looked like it would take several minutes to reach full charge. They've locked onto the Ceres drift, Kaylin said, eyes narrowing. The asteroid belt. Looks like they're setting up a show of force. Reelan eased back into his chair and calmly raised his mug. All right then, let's see what all that fancy engineering actually does. The screen pulsed again as Grand Marshal Soric returned. Bear witness, low-born species, he thundered. The celestial dominion demonstrates its wrath. Resistance is a dream. Submission is your only future. Reelan watched silently as the charge readings ticked upward. The weapon would be devastating, no doubt. But there was something else. The Dominion vessel had gone completely inert. To fire, it had stopped maneuvering entirely, like a siege tower locked into place. Reelan leaned toward the mic. Tell you what, Marshal, I've got a feeling this is the start of a very enlightening conversation. Meanwhile, aboard the Aegis Bastion, Earth's most advanced orbital fortress stationed between Mars and Jupiter, Colonel Idrin Solari was halfway through his midday rations when the door to the mess hall burst open. Tactical priority, sir. Lieutenant Corin Vale's face was pale with urgency. You need to see this now. Idrin wiped his hands and followed him at a brisk pace to the command bridge. Though dwarfed by the alien dreadnoughts, the Bastion was a different breed, agile armored, and bristling with cutting-edge Terran firepower. Report, Idrin ordered, settling into the command chair. Corin expanded the tactical feed. Target is their command ship, designation unknown. It's generating extreme energy levels, off the charts. They've been charging a primary weapon system for over 8 minutes. He pointed toward the readout. It's called the Crucible Ascendant. That thing's glowing like a dying star. Whatever they're aiming at, they want to be loud. Idrin studied the data. The readings were immense, but sluggish. All that power, and it still hadn't fired. Open a channel, Idrin said. Patch me through to Sentinel Arcus. I want Commander Voss brought up to speed. Reelan's face appeared once more on the comm feed, a crooked grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Idrin," he said, voice calm but amused. "You catching this fireworks rehearsal?" "Hard to miss," Colonel Solari replied, eyes fixed on the display. "What's your read?" "My guess." Rillan shrugged. "They're trying to spook us with theatrics. Scare us straight with a big boom." Idrin nodded. It tracked. The Dominion had barked their warnings, but the humans hadn't flinched. Now they were backing words with spectacle. Then, without warning, the Marshal's voice flooded every open frequency. "Observe, inferior species," he roared. "Gaze upon the fury of the celestial dominion. We shall obliterate the celestial body designated Sector Stone 77A. Witness and despair." Idrin checked his tactical overlay. Stone 77A was a large asteroid, just over 3 kilometers across, floating harmlessly in the drift. An impressive target, visually, if they could even land a hit. 10 minutes and counting, Corrin called out. Still building energy. The readings continued to surge. No question, the weapon was monstrous. But the time it was taking to charge made it almost comical. The Crucible Ascendant had ceased all motion and was rotating slowly to line up its shot. 15 minutes, Corrin said. Almost there. At last, the Dominion fired. A lance of searing white light erupted from the dreadnought, burning so bright it caused the filtered monitors to stutter and dim. It took nearly half a minute for the blast to travel the void. Then, with a thunderous bloom of color, the asteroid shattered into a cloud of molten debris and fractured stone. The Marshal's voice echoed again, proud and thunderous. "Behold, the destiny of all who defy the Dominion. Submit or share the fate of your drifting rock." Idrin glanced around the command deck. His crew was trying, badly, not to laugh. Even Corrin raised his hand, as if asking permission in a classroom. "Sir, may I speak freely?" "Granted, Lieutenant." That was dramatic. But 15 minutes just to charge? And another 30 seconds for the beam to reach the target? One of our rail systems could have taken that thing out in 2 seconds flat. Idrin chuckled. Corrin wasn't wrong. The Dominion weapon had power, yes, but it was clumsy and sluggish. "You know what, Lieutenant?" Idrin said, standing up slowly. "I think it's time we return the favor. Show them what we call precision." Corrin lit up like a child unwrapping a birthday gift. "Really, sir? You want to show them the new rig?" "Light it up." He spun toward the weapons array with unrestrained glee. The Bastion's kinetic lance array was the cutting edge of Terran armament. No exotic beams. No glowing effects. Just raw, solid metal flung at impossible speed. Targets locked, Corrin reported, eyes locked on the firing array. 3 asteroid bodies, similar mass to their demo target. Distance, 4,000 kilometers. "Authorize engagement," Solari said. "Fire at will." The first launch was nearly silent. A tungsten slug no larger than a clenched fist screamed out of the rail emitter, hurled at a fractional velocity just below light speed. It struck its target in 1.2 seconds. The asteroid didn't break. It disintegrated into powder and vapor. Impact confirmed. Target 1 neutralized, Corrin said, already dialing in the second. The second asteroid vanished before the first's dust settled. The third was gone before anyone could blink. 3 slugs. 3 targets. 6 seconds. Nothing left but drifting clouds of grit. Solari leaned forward and opened a line to the alien flagship. "Grand Marshal, this is Colonel Idrin Solari, commanding officer of the Aegis Bastion. Appreciate the fireworks. Very artistic. Now allow us to share our approach to asteroid mitigation." The comms fell dead silent. Idrin could practically hear them scrambling for context. The Dominion's mighty cannon had taken 15 full minutes to charge and had destroyed 1 rock. Earth's response had cleared 3 in 6 seconds. Rillan's voice crackled onto the shared frequency. "Sharp work, Idrin. Efficient. Clean." Solari smiled. "We do what we can." The Dominion's Marshal reappeared on the primary screen. The crystalline warlord didn't look triumphant now. He looked rattled. How did you inflict such rapid devastation using rudimentary kinetics? Our scanners registered no energy buildup, no charging protocols. Solari leaned back and folded his arms. Well, Marshal, we keep it old school. No glowing beams, no dramatic countdowns. We just take something small and launch it really fast. He paused, then added, turns out a dense object traveling at 1/10 the speed of light doesn't need a fancy payload. But the power requirements, the Marshal sputtered. Surely that level of acceleration demands astronomical energy. Where are your reactors? Your charge banks? Idrin glanced at Corin, who offered a half shrug. Capacitors and magnetic rails, Idrin said simply. Preload the energy. Hold it in place. Let physics do the rest. No warm-up. No delay. Just fire and forget. The Marshal said nothing. Just stared. Efficient little things, aren't they? Solari added. Elegant in their own way. No need for overkill when speed and timing win the fight. Corin's eyes narrowed. Sir, the Dominion fleet is shifting. They're adjusting formation. On screen, the alien ships began slowly realigning. The effort was awkward. They drifted with sluggish hesitance, and one of the larger cruisers nearly clipped its neighbor while trying to turn. Idrin raised a brow and toggled the mic. Marshal, he said calmly. No offense, but do your people train for coordinated maneuvers? Because what I just saw looked a bit unrehearsed. Another pause. Another heavy silence. The stars, once again, waited for a response. At last, the alien fleet responded. Grand Marshal Soric's voice returned to the channel, quieter now, and lacking the steel it once held. The Dominion Armada adheres to strategic doctrines refined over millennia. Our methods are precise. I'm sure they are, Solari replied, his tone easy. Though, maybe it's time those doctrines got a firmware update. Just a suggestion. A burst of laughter crackled through the line. Rieland's voice unmistakable. Looks like we've got their full attention now, Idrin. Solari grinned. Yeah, Rieland, I think we do. Meanwhile, Soric's VA core was not having a stellar cycle. Twice now, his invincible armada had been publicly humbled by Earth's so-called primitive defenses. The Dominion Council was growing impatient. They wanted results, dominance, proof that civilization still sat firmly in the stars, not on some backwater dirt sphere. Soric devised a solution, a cultural reckoning. If firepower didn't win their respect, then surely knowledge would. Surely, when confronted with the galaxy's finest thinkers, the humans would understand their place in the cosmic order. 3 days later, the Crucible Ascendant hosted what was arguably the most distinguished assembly in recorded galactic history. Hovering serenely in his translucent sphere was Archseer Ventrellos of a luminous accord, his mind encoded with 10,000 years of collective meditation. Grinding forward on reinforced treads was mech architect Clarn X-12, whose databanks contained the schematics of over 1 million stellar civilizations. And towering in ceremonial armor, General Brask Th. Moore of the Wargoth Coalition stood with folded arms, eyes skimming the blood-etched cannons of conflict, their 17 laws etched into living steel. These were the paragons of galactic thought. Surely, Earth would be overwhelmed. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Benjamin Muir was stuck on the side of a highway. His truck had sputtered to a halt outside the launch facility, and he'd had to catch a ride with a passing vegetable farmer to reach the spaceport. Ben wasn't a scientist or diplomat. He was a veterinarian from rural Montana who'd signed up out of simple curiosity. After all, alien biology sounded interesting, and no one else had stepped forward. Maria Gonzalez was already aboard the orbital shuttle, flipping through her briefing materials. A middle school science teacher from Lincoln, Nebraska, she'd been selected because she had a gift for breaking down complex ideas to children. She figured aliens couldn't be that different from 13-year-olds. And in the rear compartment, Pete Iron Hands Johansson was elbow-deep in a control panel, cursing quietly. At 73, he was a retired mechanic with half a century of experience and zero patience for nonsense. "They're bringing ships," he'd said. "Someone's got to check their engines." The shuttle docked with the Dominion dreadnought. The trio was led into a towering chamber, the ceiling lost in shadow. Strange runes pulsed along the walls, symbols likely full of meaning. Arch-Seer Ventrellos drifted forward, eyes glowing like distant suns. The Arch-Seer descended gracefully from his levitating sphere, his robes fluttering as though moved by unseen cosmic winds. His voice, layered and melodic, resonated like 100 voices singing in perfect harmony. "Welcome, developing intellects, to the sanctum of enlightenment. For 10 millennia, the Accord of the Luminous has meditated upon the riddles of existence. Through that sacred reflection, we have uncovered the 17 pillars, laws that guide all who aspire to true civilization." He began to recite them, his words echoing through the vast chamber, amplified by unseen acoustics. The first pillar defines the noble hierarchy among species. The second details the posture and tone appropriate when addressing a superior intellect. The third explains the sanctity of adhering to legacy structures and protocol. Dr. Ben Muir nodded respectfully, his hands in his lap. After 20 minutes, he raised one hand like a student unsure of the rules. "Pardon me, Seer, but what if someone just doesn't follow them?" The Arch-Seer froze mid-chant. His form dimmed slightly, as though the question had knocked something loose in the energy matrix that sustained him. I beg your inquiry." Ben tilted his head. "The rules. What if a species decides to ignore them? Who exactly enforces these pillars?" Silence fell. In 10,000 years, no one had dared to ask such a thing. "But they are the foundation," the Arch-Seer said, uncertain now. "All evolved life must comply." "Says who?" Ben shrugged. "We've got laws back home, too. Some are common sense, like don't steal someone's livestock. But others are just weird, like the one where you're not allowed to whistle on Sundays in certain towns. People ignore the silly ones all the time." The Arch-Seer made a sound like glass wind chimes shattering. Without another word, he drifted backward into his sphere, pulsing softly, processing. Next came Mech Architect Clarn X-12, who rolled forward with mechanical precision. His voice crackled like static shaped into language. "Perhaps logic will resonate where mysticism failed. Behold our propulsion sanctum." He led the group into a chamber filled with towering conduits and pulsing cores. Giant cooling towers hissed as containment fields flickered and buzzed. These fusion matrices sustain our armada's power. They are perfection, engineered over epochs. Pete Johansson wandered the chamber, tapping on metal casings, tilting his head to listen. After a while, he chuckled and pulled a faded notebook from his back pocket. "Y'all really took the long way around," he muttered, flipping through grease-stained pages filled with hand-sketched diagrams and pencil scrawls. "Been messing with fusion in my garage for years now. Just for fun." He pointed to one cooling tower. "This right here, way over-engineered. You don't need half of this if you're just a bit clever with heat dispersion and chamber geometry." Clarn X-12 froze mid-gesture. A whirring click echoed from inside his chassis. Confusion. Pete patted one of the pipes and smiled. Nothing wrong with making it big. But sometimes smaller and smarter wins. "If you shape the reaction chamber like this instead of a standard toroid," Pete explained, sketching quickly, "and feed the fuel from 3 convergence points rather than 1, you'll get triple the output with half the infrastructure." He handed the dog-eared notebook to Clarn X-12. The construct's optic lenses zoomed in, analyzing the crude hand-drawn equations. His processing core spun 1 billion computations in under a second. Primitive as the diagrams were, the math held. The configuration would work better than anything he'd personally engineered. This configuration, it defies protocol, Clarn said slowly. And yet it is correct. How did you derive it? Mostly trial and error, Pete said, scratching his beard. Blew my garage sky high. Twice. But third time stuck. Before the silence could deepen, General Brask Th. Moore stepped forward. His warplate clanked as his forearms unfolded the sacred Warscrolls, ancient tomes etched with carbon steel and battlefield ash. Perhaps these earthlings will grasp the nobility of structured conflict, he declared, his voice like two boulders grinding. For 5 millennia, the Wargoth coalition has mastered the sacred art of conquest. He unfurled scroll after scroll, each brimming with complex fleet patterns, swarm formations, and multi-vector engagements honed over centuries. Dozens of diagrams filled the table, blitz columns, siege spirals, blockade crescents. These are the formations that break civilizations. Here, for instance, Crimson Eclipse. It saturates a sector and overwhelms resistance through pure positioning. Maria studied the scrolls thoughtfully. Why not just go around them? The general blinked. Go around. Yeah. You know. Flank. It's basic. When my 8th graders play capture the flag, they always try to slip around the sides. Charging straight, it never works. The chamber went still. In 5,000 years of ritualized combat, the Wargoth had never even considered bypassing a frontal approach. Their entire doctrine was based on overwhelming, head-on pressure. Brask turned back to the scrolls, scanning them as though searching for some lost detail. But the scrolls make no mention of this flank maneuver. Maybe that's the issue, Maria said gently. The best tactics don't always get written down. Sometimes they're just obvious. In the upper control spire of the Crucible Ascendant, Grand Marshal Soric watched in disbelief. His elite delegation, the finest minds across known space, were being intellectually outmaneuvered by a vet, a schoolteacher, and a retired mechanic. The humans weren't boasting. They weren't trying to prove superiority. They were simply offering practical fixes to problems that had gone unquestioned for eons. It wasn't just humiliating. It was destabilizing. Soric paced. His council was watching, demanding results. His reputation, his legacy, was slipping through his claws like lunar dust. He had one card left. A formal contest. 3 challenges, chosen by the Dominion, to settle the question of supremacy once and for all. He would force these earthborn anomalies to face the greatest disciplines of the stars. And this time there would be no casual improvisation. The Confederation would set the stage. Their rules, their tools, their best. There would be no excuses. The challenge was unveiled with cosmic grandeur. In the grand atrium of the Crucible Ascendant, beneath vaulted ceilings carved from star-forged alloy, Marshal Soric stood before an assembly of alien dignitaries, 12 species in ceremonial regalia, their eyes fixed on him. People of Earth, Soric declared, his voice amplified across the galactic relay. The Dominion presents this trifold challenge of ascendance. 3 trials shall determine your worth among the stars. He raised 3 crystal orbs, each glowing with a different hue. First, strategic conflict. Simulated warfare using our most advanced neural tacticians. Second, innovation. Demonstrate your highest technological achievement. Third, diplomacy. Resolve a complex interstellar crisis without force. He paused, expecting silence, reverence. Back on Liberty Station, Captain Reelan raised an eyebrow and turned to Amy. Well, that sounds dramatic. Want to tell them we're in? She nodded. With pleasure. Cool. Let's play. 3 days later, the first contest began aboard the Dominion flagship. The Confederation unveiled their pride, the Ethermind, a war sim computer the size of a building. Its processors could model battles across entire star systems, accounting for orbital physics, radiation belts, even gravitational anomalies. Their champion, General Brask Th. Moore, master of the scrolls, born in battle. The humans? They sent Ryan Torres. He strolled into the chamber wearing faded jeans, a t-shirt with a spaceship on it, and a look of casual interest. By day, he worked weekend shifts for the National Guard. By night, he was a strategy gamer with a 98% PvP win rate. The aliens unveiled the Sim, a fully immersive holographic arena showing stars, planets, asteroid fields. Brask announced the scenario. You command 50 obsolete ships. I will command 500 of our most advanced warcraft. Your task survive. Ryan cracked his knuckles. Oh, so you're giving me a final boss fight right away. Nice. The simulation began. The Dominion fleet advanced in immaculate formation, just as their ancient scrolls prescribed. Waves of ships in synchronized alignment, weapons locked forward, shields pulsing in rhythm. Ryan blinked at the holograms and chuckled. They're all clumped together. This is going to be a joke. Instead of charging, he split his tiny fleet. Each vessel broke off, flying erratically, darting between moons and debris fields like gnats through a hurricane. He used asteroids for ambushes, gravity wells for cover, radiation clouds for misdirection. The Dominion fleet tried to maintain cohesion, but every time they pivoted to engage, Ryan's ship struck from somewhere else. From above, from below, from the shadows behind them. Their perfect lines collapsed into chaos. The AI tried to adjust, but their doctrine had no response for unpredictability. They were brilliant at fighting themselves. And Ryan? He played like a kid with nothing to lose. 2 hours later, it was over. Not a single one of Ryan's ships had fallen. The Dominion fleet had been picked apart, vessel by vessel, until nothing remained but simulated debris and broken formation markers. General T.H. Moore stood frozen before the battle display, his war-bred mind unable to process the outcome. How did you achieve such a result?" he asked, stunned. Ryan leaned back, stretched his arms, and grinned. "Honestly? Just played it like StarCraft. Hit-and-run tactics. Use the terrain. Stay unpredictable. Real basic stuff." He paused. "You guys ever play StarCraft?" The silence was answer enough. The second challenge, technological innovation, took place the next day. The problem: develop a galaxy-wide faster-than-light communication network. The Dominion assembled a think tank of epic proportions. 17 species contributed. Equations unfolded across multidimensional light panels. Their solution involved quantum entanglement stretched across interdimensional harmonics. 4 hours of dazzling math and technical jargon that required 3 holoscreens just to summarize. Representing Earth, Dr. Nancy White. She was 26, a PhD candidate in theoretical physics at MIT. When not running lab simulations, she taught entry-level courses to help cover tuition. Nancy sat quietly during the presentation, jotting notes in a battered spiral notebook. When they finished, she raised a hand. "That's wow. Really impressive work. But can I ask something?" The lead physicist, Dr. Vexer of the Crystalline Collective, inclined his crystalline head. "Of course. Have you tried making the quantum particles bigger?" Confused murmurs rippled across the alien delegation. "Larger particles?" Vexer asked. "Quantum effects only operate at subatomic scales. Expansion would negate entanglement." Nancy pulled out a napkin from her lunch tray and started sketching. "Right, that's what I thought too. But I started wondering, why? What if you adjusted the harmonic resonance field to allow quantum coherence at a macro scale? The math checks out. Here, look." Her drawing was crude. A few symbols, a rough harmonic diagram. But the idea behind it was radical. Instead of controlling fragile, unstable microparticles, she proposed engineering larger, entangled states that were easier to handle and far more stable over galactic distances. Vexer processed the concept. His crystalline mind ran simulations in milliseconds. It would work. And not only that, it was better, more stable, more scalable, more elegant. "This would transform interstellar communication," he said, awed. "Where did this idea come from?" Nancy shrugged, embarrassed. Honestly, one of my students asked why particles had to be so small. I didn't have a good answer, so I started thinking. Challenge 2, complete. The third and final contest was diplomacy. The scenario, a tangled web of claims over mining rights in a disputed star system. 17 species, all with conflicting interests. Cultural traditions, environmental laws, labor codes. The Confederation solution? A 400-page treaty that accounted for every contingency. It had taken 6 months to draft. Earth's representative? Mayor Tom Fairbanks, retired mayor of a small Midwest town and former car salesman. He wore a BOLO tie and carried a smile like he already knew how it was going to end. Tom Fairbanks, known back home as Mayor Bradley, wasn't a scholar or a high-ranking diplomat. He ran a town in rural Kansas with fewer than 3,000 residents. For over a decade, he'd solved disputes over parking lots, water bills, and stray cattle with calm conversation and pie charts. Common sense was his only credential. He sat at a polished obsidian table aboard the Crucible Ascendant, flipping through the first page of the Confederation's proposed resolution, a 400-page interstellar treaty, so dense it made his eyes ache. Thorough, Tom said, closing the document with a smile. But mind if I ask something simple? The alien dignitaries exchanged puzzled glances. What does everyone actually want? Ambassador Silk of the Aquatic Federation swirled in her containment sphere. Equitable access to the mineral fields, with safeguards for the native biosphere. Representative Corvin from the Mining Guild tapped his claws together. We seek employment opportunities and reparations for prior environmental damage. Elder Wispwin of the nomadic clans floated forward. Our ancestral lands must remain untouched. They are sacred. Tom nodded. All right, so you want steady jobs, fair pay, and protection for the important places. Doesn't sound impossible. He leaned back in his chair. Tell you what, let's fire up a grill, throw some ribs on, and talk like neighbors. You'd be amazed what folks can figure out over good food. Stunned silence. A grill. Wispwin echoed. A barbecue, Tom clarified. You know, outdoor fire, shared dishes, no pressure. People get to know each other. Empathy tends to do the negotiating for you. And with that, Tom pulled out his phone and started organizing. Within 3 hours, he'd arranged the impossible. Earth's finest pitmasters were beamed aboard the Dominion's flagship. Each alien group was invited to bring their own cuisine, from vapor-fried plankton to glowing root fungi. What followed wasn't a negotiation. It was a 6-hour feast. Laughter echoed across translation arrays. Old grievances softened under spice rub and slow-roasted brisket. Traditions were exchanged. Dishes were shared. Songs were hummed. And when the final plate was cleared, the agreement was sealed. No treaty. No clauses. Just a firm handshake. Mining would proceed in designated zones. Profits would be shared. The sacred lands would be honored. The 400-page document, forgotten. From his command bridge, Grand Marshal Soric watched in disbelief. His elite tacticians, best scientists, and legendary diplomats, undone by an old man with a phone and a smoker. And the humans? They hadn't cheated. They didn't bring advanced tech or ancient algorithms. They just saw things differently. Where the Dominion sought complexity, humans found simplicity. Where others layered logic, they used empathy. It was humbling. A soft ping cut through the silence. Captain Rylan Morrison's voice came over the interstellar comms. So, Admiral, what's the verdict? Marshal Soric exhaled slowly, his voice almost reverent. You won. All three. There was a pause. Rylan chuckled. Neat. So now what? And after a long silence, the question came, quiet, but world-changing. Would you be willing to teach us? Commander Julia Parker had one of the most unusual jobs on Earth, translating military objectives into something ordinary people could actually understand. She was chosen for this meeting not for rank, but for clarity, and because she never backed down, even when standing toe-to-toe with alien brass. The meeting didn't take place in a grand chamber this time. Marshal Soric had learned his lesson. The towering halls and echoing ceilings unnerved humans. So now they sat in a modest conference room with soft lighting and walls that didn't hum like a cathedral. More human. The Dominion commander entered slowly. His crystalline body, once radiant and sharp-edged, now shimmered faintly, dull, almost tired. Soric sank into the sea across from her. "Commander Parker," he began, his voice dimmer than before, "on behalf of the Galactic Confederation, we concede. Your kind has bested us in every challenge." He paused. "But I must understand. How? How can a civilization as young as yours outperform ones refined over millennia?" Julia took a moment. She folded her hands. Let the silence stretch. Then she smiled gently. "Admiral, we're not better than you. Not smarter. Just different." A faint flicker pulsed through his crystalline limbs. "But you dismantled our strongest logic, outwitted our elite, defied our centuries of strategy." "We did," she said, "but not by being stronger, just by thinking sideways." She leaned in, eyes locked on his. "You want to know our secret? We don't overcomplicate things. We don't believe complexity equals intelligence. We look for what works. Simple, clean, effective." The Admiral processed this slowly. "Clarify." Julia gestured to the metallic walls surrounding them. "Your ships," she said, "gargantuan, bristling with weapons. But you can't turn them without risking a collision. They look terrifying, but they handle like bricks." She tapped her tablet. A sleek human vessel appeared, darting across the screen like a hawk. "Ours? Smaller, faster, built to maneuver, not intimidate. You focused on scale. We focused on mobility. Yours impressed the eye. Ours win the fight." "But surely firepower, size, is strength in warfare," he insisted. "Only if it hits something," Julia replied. "A massive cannon that never lands a shot is dead weight. A small one that strikes with precision, that ends battles." Soric was still. No rebuttal came. "And it's not just your ships," she continued. "Your tactics are ancient dogma. Your tech is tangled in layers no one questions. Your diplomacy is a labyrinth no one understands." She rose and stepped to the viewport. Beyond the glass, Earth's ships drifted in calm formation, dwarfed by Dominion vessels, yet fluid and alert, like wolves among elephants. "You want to know your real problem?" she asked quietly. The Admiral turned toward her, expectant. "You're so busy proving how advanced you are, you forgot to ask if it actually works." And in the silence that followed, the Dominion's greatest warrior realized he hadn't lost to superior weapons or ancient wisdom. He'd lost to honesty. "That's the real issue, Admiral," Julia said softly, not unkindly. "You forgot how to learn." Marshal Soric tilted his faceted head, his crystalline features dimmed by the weight of her words. "We are a highly advanced civilization," he said, almost defensively. "We have academies on 1,000 moons, universities on gas giants, libraries encoded in starfields." Julia nodded. "Impressive. But tell me, when was the last time someone in your hierarchy stood up and asked, 'Does this still make sense?'" The Admiral stared into the table's holographic grain. Time passed in silence. When he finally answered, his voice was nearly a whisper. "Many centuries ago. Perhaps longer." "There it is," Julia said. "That's the problem. You perfected the form of knowledge and forgot its purpose. You've preserved traditions so tightly. You've choked the oxygen out of curiosity." Just then, the door hissed open. A blur of movement skittered inside. Zip, youngest member of the Dominion envoy, entered the room in a flurry of chittering limbs and iridescent wings. The insectoid youth from the hive clusters had been eavesdropping. His antennae quivered with eagerness. "Commander Parker," he burst out, "is it true that human offspring are taught to challenge authority? Julia laughed. Oh, absolutely. Sometimes they challenge everything, even the rules we just made up. And you allow this? Zip asked, astonished. We encourage it, she said, smiling. It's how we grow. We want each generation to ask hard questions. That's how we get better. Zip's compound eyes shimmered. Could you teach us this questioning? This resistance? Marshal Soric's crystalline body tensed, ready to object. But Julia raised a hand gently. Admiral, she said, maybe that's exactly what your people need. A generation raised to explore outside the box, not to destroy your traditions, but to test them. The Admiral's glow flickered, uncertain. But we have maintained order for millennia by adhering to protocol. And look where it brought you, she said gently. Ships that can't pivot. Weapons that charge like old engines. Strategy scrolls that collapse the second someone improvises. She sat back down, eyes steady. We're not saying throw out everything. Just open a few windows. Let some new air in. Silence fell again, deeper this time. Finally, Marshal Soric spoke. What would you need to begin teaching us? 3 months later, on the fusion decks of the Dominion's capital cruiser, Pete Johnson was flat on his back beneath a humming reactor core. Alien engineers surrounded him, their metallic limbs twitching with anticipation. Pete, smudged with grease and whistling a country tune, adjusted a plasma regulator with a wrench older than most starships. See, the trouble with you folks, he said, tightening the bolt, is you think more pipes means more power. He tapped the containment coil. Nope. Just route the juice straight through here. Skip all the extra junk. Engineer Clank 7's optics flashed. Primitive, but brilliant. Clank 7 rumbled across the engineering bay, gears humming softly beneath his alloy plating. But Master Pete, he said, confused. Our safety regulations mandate 17 independent failsafes per reactor chamber. Pete didn't even glance up from where he was elbow-deep in circuitry. Exactly. That's why your power cores are the size of shopping malls. He chuckled, wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better decades, and flicked a switch with a satisfying click. Trust me, I've spent half a century blowing things up in my garage. Eventually, you learn what actually matters. On Deck 6, in what used to be the Dominion's Sterile Medical Research Lab, Dr. Ben Murphy was giving a crash course in alien anatomy by teaching basic veterinary medicine. He stood in front of a collection of curious healers, beings made of gas, crystal, or translucent jelly, all observing his demonstration with wonder. The trick is, Ben said, drawing a crude sketch on a hollow board. Anatomy is just variations on a theme. Whether you've got 3 hearts or 1, 10 lungs or none, the fundamentals stay the same. Dr. Harmonic Pulse, a healer from the Crystalline Collective, flickered in pastel light. But each species requires unique care protocols. Ben nodded. Sure, but the logic's identical. Keep the vital parts working, fix what's broken, and don't poke things unless you know what they do. I've treated everything from pythons to ponies. This isn't all that different. Meanwhile, what was once a formal war planning chamber had been transformed into something else entirely, a classroom. Maria Gonzalez stood at the center, referee of a heated capture-the-flag match involving war generals, tacticians, and at least one philosopher. Flags were flying. Dignity was not. The trick, she said, watching a Gorthani commander attempt to sneak behind a translucent tactician, is to imagine what your enemy sees. But remember, they don't think like you. General T.H. Moore raised 2 of his 4 hands. But the sacred scrolls contain protocols for every encounter. They're a good place to start, Maria agreed. But what if the enemy never read your scrolls or doesn't care? Strategy needs flexibility. Across the ship, Admiral Soric sat in his command center, dictating into his personal log. His crystalline body pulsed brightly, warmer, steadier, hopeful. Day 97 of cultural integration with Earth, he began. Human efficiency modifications have increased fleet performance by 412%. engineering breakthroughs resolved 3 long-standing power bottlenecks. Culinary units now utilize seasoning. He paused, watching his fleet perform formation drills, human style. Loose, unpredictable, effective. Recommendation: formalize full alliance with Earth. Also deploy additional personnel to study what humans call common sense. Despite its name, it appears to be exceedingly rare. He closed the log and opened a channel. "Captain Morrison," he said, smiling. Jake's face appeared on screen, coffee mug in hand, grin unshaken. "I've been pondering your earlier warning," the Admiral said, "about a region called Texas. Should we be alarmed?" Jake's grin widened. "Oh, Admiral," he said, "you ain't seen nothing yet." And for the first time in 1,000 years, Soric looked forward to whatever came next. What started as a threat ended as a lesson, one that reshaped the galaxy forever. If you enjoyed this journey through First Contact, Defiance, and Unexpected Victory, hit that like button, share it with a fellow sci-fi fan, and subscribe for more stories where humanity doesn't just face the impossible. We outthink it.